Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to another Fireside Adoptees Adoptee Fire Speaker Series interview. Got a great guest tonight, Grace Young Foster. I wanted to just tell you a little bit about Grace. She's the founder and CEO of the Inclusion Initiative, which we'll be learning about here in just a few minutes. She was born in South Korea. At 3 years old, Grace was orphaned and abandoned at the local market. She immigrated to the US at 5 years old, eventually ended up in the foster care system, and then was adopted. Her experiences as an immigrant, a person of color in a very white community, and also her very difficult experience as a transracial adoptee and foster youth influenced her narrative of self-rejection of her Asian identity. She was in constant pursuit of finding white belonging for over 25 years and being ashamed of her Asian heritage. But now she has created belonging for those who share these intersectional identities. Grace holds an MBA from NYU's Stern School of Business. She also holds an associate's degree in business administration and a BA in communications from the University of Minnesota in the Twin Cities. So Grace, thank you so much for being here and welcome to Fireside Adoptees.
Oh, that's a beautiful intro, Greg. Wonderful reading. Thank you.
Thank you. That's sometimes the most stressful part, is making sure it doesn't sound like or look like something like this. So hopefully there was some little bit of relaxation there, but that's sometimes the hardest part.
Great. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Again,
Thank
so
you for having
excited.
me.
Oh, absolutely. And you are one of the many adoptees I'm meeting through LinkedIn. I wanted to say, because I think there's a growing groundswell of people, particularly a lot of intercountry and transracial adoptees on LinkedIn, and not only in the professional context, but also doing advocacy and putting great things out there. Your content is all over there. And I know you've branched out into Instagram, for example, and are appearing in other places. So we'll be talking about the Inclusion Initiative. It's a big part of what I wanted to talk about tonight. But just the fact that there's this presence on LinkedIn of a lot of transracial adoptees. I've met a lot of Asian adoptees. I've met people from different countries. I don't know if that's been your experience as well. Does to see the community kind of growing that way? Is that what you've observed as well?
Yeah, I mean, frankly, I believe there are tons of non-transracial adoptees too. They just haven't self-identified yet.
Yeah.
And that's part of why I'm building the Inclusion Initiative. Yeah.
Can't wait to hear about it. But I wanted to start with some things about you, because of course your story as an adoptee is a very compelling thing for anybody to be able to come out and talk about their story as an adoptee. And I know you and I have spoken before and had a wonderful short conversation, but got to know each other a little bit. I learned some of your story. I've been reading the things you have been posting, but I wondered if you could share a little bit about the situation as far as you understand it, that led to your abandonment. I know that's a strong word to have to use, but I know that is the word that you actually used in your bio as well. But do you know anything about the circumstances around that?
Yeah, and I think it's everyone will choose to share, right, their story in their own way. But broadly, people that have been placed into foster care or that have been adopted, we have been abandoned in one way or another. And I think, the dominant narrative of our society really shifts that language, right? So it does sound less harsh, but for me, it's really important to reclaim the language and reclaim my truth in terms of how I speak about how I felt, what I feel, and what my experience is, right, with adoption and with foster care, because it wasn't my choice at the end of the day. And I don't know the full history of my origins. There's a lot of transracial adoptees, especially who don't receive accurate or holistic information about their situations. For me, as far as I know, what's in my records is that I was found in the local market in Busan, South Korea, and was just left there by my lonesome, no idea why. And the local police ended up taking me into custody, processing me, and placing me into an orphanage there. I was later transferred to an orphanage in South Korea. And so I spent 2 years in orphanages from about 3 to 5. And, all of this is guessing, right? My age was a guess. My name was given to me by the state. Everything about me is kind of a guess, except for the fact that I literally was standing in the, in the market in South Korea. So I'm from there. I don't even know if I was born there, to be honest, but I'm from there. That is the first place of origin that I know of. And so, yeah, it is a very harsh story. People are very surprised, right, when they hear it and they're like, oh my goodness, like basically like, why don't you sound more upset about it? And frankly, it's because we adoptees, we have to tell our stories all the time. And
Yes.
in a way, we learn to disassociate or become kind of numb or become this other person when we're talking about it. But yes, the truth is, it was a very jarring experience. And I still remember to this day, the time in the orphanage and the transitions into the United States. So yeah, it was a very interesting experience from that perspective.
I couldn't help but be drawn to that comment. Everything about me was kind of a guess that just kind of slammed into me because I know we have intercountry adoptees on in the gallery here. And anytime I hear something like that, just broadens my own perspective and awareness of it. The extra layer of unknowing, it just must be really something else. And so that was impactful to me to hear that, just hearing you say that, and don't know how old you are, right? You don't know where you were born. You came eventually from someplace to the US, but you don't know where you were born necessarily. And I'm wondering, do you, and you remember the time in the orphanages? Wow. So that's significant as well. What were the circumstances of you coming to the US?
Well, there were a couple of things that happened. One, I was transferred to Seoul, which we all know is like the central hub for South Korea. And it's where a lot of adoptions happen. So I was fortunate enough, right, to be transferred to a pretty prominent city where people from the US would adopt kids from there. And there was this family in particular that, you know, I don't know if they visit. I'm not sure how they came across my information. Back then too, I was brought over in the early 90s. So, back then, I believe there were not requirements for overseas travel to adopt. I think at that point you could do everything by phone and paperwork and all that stuff. I'm not sure. I believe it used to be you had to travel internationally and visit the kid and bring the kid home and all that. But that wasn't the case for me. And so I am fortunate to have been picked out of all the kids in the orphanage, right, to be adopted. There are many that do not get adopted, which is really hard for, all of us in this room can relate, right? Thinking about all the kids that don't get placed, that don't get a home. So the family that ended up taking me in was a mixed race, white and Japanese family, actually. And they were pretty, they're upper middle class, well educated. They're professors at the large university in the Midwest. I was brought into Wisconsin for my first home. And I remember having them meet me at the airport. So I was escorted from the orphanage, not sure by whom, but I remember two adult individuals with me traveling on the plane over to the States. And, I met my first family in the parking lot for the first time. So,
Wow. Yeah. And it's interesting how, and there's a story about to come here. They were your first family. And
Yeah.
so I know that something more needs to be told here, and that's part of the complication and heartbreak of what you went through in your youth. But would you like to tell us more about that? What happened after that?
Yeah. And it's great that this is a space, right, where we all have this lived experience, because when I am telling this story to non-adoptees, there's a lot of explanation that has to happen with the different nuances of our experiences and our feelings. But I think, we all understand in this space right now that it was a very jarring experience being thrust into a brand new environment. For me at that age, coming where I came from, I was coming from a place of, I remember, right? I was always being cold. I was always cold. I was always sad. I was always hungry. And then all of a sudden, I have a room of my own. Never had that before. I had pajamas. I had a bed of my own. I learned, right, what it meant to have a house and a family, and more food than I could ever imagine, toys of my own, all of this stuff. So it was a very jarring experience where there was like this feeling of elation, right? Where all of my basic needs were being met and more.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden there were people that were doting on me, just me. And when I was in the orphanage, um, much like, institutional care facilities here in the US, group homes or whatnot, there are so many kids per caretaker that you don't get any individualized attention. It's very much like a factory type setting. And coming into this new home, even at 5 years old, right, I can remember just that feeling of um, overwhelming warmth from realizing here were two caretakers that were doting on me, just me, plus the siblings that I inherited through, that family. So they had three biological children of their own. Very shortly after, when the rose-colored glasses came off, that family realized, oh, adopting, especially an older child that has lived pretty much a whole life before we got them, it is not all happiness and flowers and good things. This child has some complicated emotions and complicated behavioral needs that we're not prepared for. And for me, right, I am the child. I obviously don't understand what's going on. But what I am doing is not trusting. I am, taking and not giving. I am hoarding things. I'm, stealing food. I'm doing a lot of things that you would expect from a child that has gone through what I did. But because this family and these parents were never educated properly by the institutions that literally, you know, for lack of a better word, they literally sold me to this family, right? I was traded for money. Lots of money exchanged hands between lawyers and institutions and et cetera, et cetera. And this happens to all people in the system. There's money that exchanges hands for you. And so the money was more important, right, than what happened to us after. And that was evident in the lack of education that these parents received about what it meant to adopt A, transracially, B, to adopt a person that had this kind of separation and trauma and lived experience of being in an institution because they were separated from their family, from being abandoned, from experiencing hunger and homelessness and all of this stuff. So after 2 years in that home, I was never formally adopted by them, by the way. After 2 years in that home, they one day pulled me aside, and it had just been a roller coaster of them learning just all of the needs that I had and not being able to address them, the emotional and mental health needs that I had.
Yeah.
And I was 5, little kids also just do things. But they pulled me aside one day and said, okay, we tried, but you're not getting any better. You're too bad to stay in this home. We can't handle you. We don't know what's wrong with you. They sat me down at 7 years old and told me this and said, you're leaving in 2 days. So you're going to go into another family and we just can't take care of you anymore. So, at that age, right, I understood what was happening, but I didn't understand my emotions, my feelings. I didn't know how to process any of it, but I had never healed from the first experiences of trauma that I had, right? Being abandoned, being transferred from orphanage to orphanage, and now this trauma. So for me, that was kind of the norm for me. Of course, I was surprised, but I was also not experiencing good things in that home. They were very abusive in certain ways because they didn't understand, right? How to care for someone that had been through this kind of situation. And in the 90s, right, there was very much like the dominant parent, authoritative parenting style, and that's really what they practiced on me, but in a very I would say in a more aggressive way than was necessary, and of course in a much more aggressive way than they should have for a child in my situation. So all of those misunderstandings, the lack of education, the lack of support that I was receiving, the lack of support, honestly, that they received from the institutions led me to be placed into foster care. The social work came literally 2 days later. I had one bag that was packed. And they didn't even hug me goodbye because they told me it was too hard to say goodbye, so they weren't going to say goodbye. But they did give me a photo book with some pictures of my time there with them. Like that was supposed to like make everything better. Honestly, I'm glad I have the photo book now. It's the only piece of that age of my life that I have, I have like 10 pictures from that time. But oh yeah, someone put they never account for reactive attachment disorder. Yeah. Of course, many of us are familiar, if not all of us are familiar with that. But I had, very traumatic attachment disorder, of course. But yeah, so I went to a home that was about 45 minutes away. And I remember the social worker saying, actually, this is a really good thing for you. You're going to love this new home. WTF, why do you say that to a child that's been given up? Like, it shows you how messed up the system is in training their professionals and how to navigate and support kids in these situations and parents in these situations. And I did go to this home she was telling me how amazing this home was, how amazing these parents are, right? And if you're an older, wiser, more experienced adult, like the red flashing lights should be going off in your head. But I'm a 7-year-old kid, so I'm doing my best to trust her and believe her because that's all I can do. I have no choice. And I arrived to this home, and I ended up being the 13th child that they had brought in. And it was 2 white parents and they had 13 adopted kids that were, I'm sorry, 12 other adopted kids that were all nationalities, races, ages. And the social worker said, this is actually a much better home for you because there's kids your age, there's kids that look like you, and these parents, they have adopted a lot, so they know what they're doing, basically.
Oh boy.
And that was literally, took me in, introduced me to the parents. She left. So I'm standing there, like I'm not sure what the requirements are. But I feel like it should be more than 20, 30 minutes of transition time
Oh yeah.
with
That
just
is,
the one person that I had known from, the beginning to the end. Because this caseworker, I had met her during my time with the first family, and she had been just assigned to do check-ins and do some support with the family. So I had met her once or twice, but she left and that was it. I never saw her again. And this home and this family was so different and opposite and chaotic from the last home I was in. And I was overwhelmed. That family, by the time I left, it grew into 19 adopted kids. They had multiple foster kids in and out of the home that didn't get adopted for whatever reason. And it was just a very extreme experience. And I will stop there and see what questions or follow-up you want me to do, Greg.
I almost have no words for it. Just to have gone through all that and to have them telling you, don't worry, this will be great. And nobody knowing how to care for the needs of somebody, a displaced person in a totally different environment. And to think that somebody really convinced themselves and tried to convince you that this will be a great fit, this will be wonderful, this will be, even this idea of fit, I know that's kind of objectionable language, but I can't imagine what that was like for you. And I imagine it's taken years to process all the things that happened from these different stages. You have these very concrete stages in your life, in your story. And I feel like the biggest thing I've been getting from this, besides all the compounding of the trauma that was there to begin with, is the way everything is so ill-equipped. People are not prepared to do this the right way or for the right reasons, right? If somebody's bringing all of those children in, it's really hard to believe there was a healthy mentality there about doing that. So
Yeah, so let me share just a little bit about the experience in this family, and then maybe transition to, why I do the work I do now,
yeah,
if that works. Okay, great. And I just want to make clear, right, that this is my own experience. I'm not speaking for the siblings that lived in the same homes with me. I'm not speaking for, obviously, the parents that decided to bring me in for whatever reason. And I do think that intentions and reasons do evolve and shift over time. When the family that I ended up being adopted into, I got there at 7, and about a year or so later, I was officially adopted by them. But when they had first started, like years before me, that family and those parents could not have their own biological children. And that is such a common reason that all of us have heard, right, on why we are adopted or why those we know are adopted. But over time, I think that reason began to shift, right? Initially, they just couldn't have kids. They wanted their own family. They were very religious, so there is that big dominant narrative in our society about saving kids, doing the Christian thing.
Right.
You can save them, that whole saviorism narrative is
Sure.
pretty harmful, but it was very, very prevalent, especially in my era. And because they were so religious and involved in the church, I think the unspoken reason, evolved over time, right, to how they felt every time they got a new child. And they ended up taking in a lot of um, uh, foster youth and kids that were like ready to be adopted, who had unsuccessful placements in the past, or they had physical disabilities, or they were kids of color. And I think the accolades they were getting from society, like they were on, they got news interviews done all the time. They were really promoted as pillars in the community. Makes sense, right? Two white parents
Oh, yeah.
doing the good thing, bringing all these basically like special needs or in need kids of color in. And I think over time that started becoming their reason for doing that. They didn't need any more kids. They already had a family.
Right.
They had a family when they had me. They had 12 kids in their family when they had me. And then they got 6 more after me. And there was also, I think like 4 foster kids in and out of the home too that never got adopted. So, it's just like this constant wheel, open, revolving door
Revolving doors.
where I think, and initially their intentions were the more pure intentions, and then later it kind of just got out of their control, and they did. I don't know that they knew how to stop.
Mhm.
And again, I can't speak for them. They're not here to defend themselves, so please, bear that in mind as I'm sharing my perspective. That's my perspective now as an adult reflecting on this. They might be able to share a completely different reason, but that many kids in a home, I have one daughter. I'm a newer mom. I have a 2-year-old. I barely have time and energy for her on the best of days.
Right.
I don't know. 5, 12, 13, 19. No, you do not have resources personally. You don't have the brain space. You don't have the emotional space to be in, even the physical energy to be able to execute properly meeting the needs of all of those kids. And someone else in the chat, like, who allowed them to do that? Well, the system did. In
Right.
fact, they were on the top of the list for that particular county in Wisconsin. Like, this is the family you call. Basically, what I heard the social worker say was, this is the family you call when there's problem kids that need a home. And so I believe that's not allowed anymore. But back to what I was sharing about, just the capacity, you can imagine what that did to all of us in the home.
Right.
You can imagine, right, that there were basically social circles and power dynamics that formed within the home. Like we were basically like an institution, but
Yeah.
a family. But there were different tiers of kids that were on the good list or the bad list. There was those power dynamics that came with it. And I will tell you that I did not make the good list. And so my experience there was really, it was really hard. It was really challenging. And there are parts of my experience that I keep really private because I think it's important for us adoptees to really be able to write our stories
Yes.
and decide what it is that we want to share. we're not clickbait. So I choose to not share things because it's nobody's business. I share them with people that I want to share them with.
Mhm.
But there were some pretty bad things that happened there for years, and to multiple kids in the home. And, I also don't share too, right? Because I'm trying to protect the privacy of my adoptive siblings and foster siblings that were in that same home. And sometimes people put puzzle pieces together. And so I want to protect the privacy of all the siblings. But basically, my whole experience, about 2 years after I entered that home, so about 9-ish years old, until I was 17, it was pretty tough because when I came into the home, it was, I was basically, uh, it was communicated to the parents, right, that I was this sweet, innocent, quiet, good, Korean girl that needed a home. And when I ended up being a full person, right, I did naughty things. I cried. I screamed. I would fight with my siblings. When it became clear that I wasn't this perfect child, things started really unraveling. And if you can follow me on LinkedIn, by the way, Grace Young Foster on LinkedIn. I write a lot about like these kinds of experiences, but basically, I spent my whole child and youth code switching constantly, wearing this mask of perfection, right? I have to be perfect or I'm going to get kicked out of this home, because I was seeing other kids also leaving the home for behavioral issues.
Right.
And I could never be myself, right? Because if I was ever myself, bad things were happening, right? There was all sorts of abuse happening in the home. And I was terrified that I would have to leave. And so all of those years of that, plus, right, growing up in a home that was so dominated by these white parents, right, ideas of morals, ethics, behavior, how to talk, how to dress, what you should look like, what you should talk like, all of that. It really never helped me embrace, right, where I came from. We would barely talk about that.
That was
And
something I wanted to ask you about. Yeah, so I'm glad you're
yeah,
doing
I
this.
spent my whole life, right, trying to mimic the dominant society that I was surrounded by, even though I had this whole home of kids who were of different nationalities and races. Well, we all were raised the same, so we all uh, tried to exude those same behaviors of whiteness, white culture. And we were never taught about our heritage, our countries, our food, our nothing, right? That was all just like wiped. And some of my older siblings from Korea actually had remembered parts of their life. And so I was able to learn bits and pieces through them. But I should have been allowed to have been immersed, right, in
Yes.
the culture of my origins and be like shown a community of people that look like me so that I could feel right, accepted and belonging. Instead, I spent my whole childhood and youth wishing I had blonde hair and blue eyes. I hated how I looked, hated it.
Hmm.
And I was told a lot, right, that I was ugly. I was made fun of all the time from all the white kids that weren't used to seeing kids of color in their communities. So because of this negative experience, I ended up leaving the home at 17. And I was really fortunate to have a friend in my life that believed me, right? Believed when I would tell her that I was experiencing abuse in the home. And I was at my wit's end, right? I had contemplated suicide a few times. Many things that a lot of us have either personally experienced or know someone that has that have our lived experience. So her family, they had, they were constantly welcoming me into their home, inviting me over, like helping me escape whenever they could. And so at 17, I ended up couch surfing with her. Completely moved out to just, I was done.
Yeah.
I was done. And my adoptive parents were livid, so angry, right? Because it was shattering that external perception of them as these wonderful, amazing parents. I was really fortunate to have a family believe me and a friend believe me and provide that safe space for me until I could go to college. And so all of that lived experience, I went off on my own to college. I applied to only one school because it was the only thing that I knew. It was a religious school. I thought that was like my only option. I wasn't educated about any of that stuff. And I ended up having to make my own way. So I was in school working 3 to 4 part-time jobs. This religious school was very expensive. I had no idea the debt I had taken on. I didn't know any of that, right? And I'm floundering in school because I'm working 4 part-time jobs and trying to go to school. And all of these things. I don't have a car. I'm walking everywhere or taking the bus, it's just all of these things. And I had moved to Minnesota, and this just set me on it was just like a spiral of events because of my experience of transitioning out of the adoptive home into being on my own completely. And I am very privileged in many ways. I had a pretty good education growing up. I guess the fact that I had such proximity to whiteness, right? I learned the culture, I learned the behaviors, like that was pounded into me. I could navigate this dominant space that held power over me. So I understood, right, how to build relationships with white people in power to be able to get job opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. And, those types of things allowed me to get these small opportunities that I know not everyone who experiences bad adoptions like this, or especially people that age out of the foster care system, like these kinds of job opportunities are things like they don't even get, even though it was restaurant work and retail work and cleaning work and all that kind of stuff. Let's just face it, right? Black and brown people in our country have so much discrimination just based on how they look and the color of their skin, that I do feel like I got job opportunities in the Midwest because I was Asian, so I was less threatening. And I spoke white. I was as white as possible. I wanted to be as white as possible. So that's how I behaved. So that made me safe and unthreatening. So I was able to get these certain job opportunities. And I started building a career off of that. It took me 9 years to finish undergrad. So I left that private college after the first year. I flunked out. I took a break, just working, trying to figure it out, trying to pay my rent, trying to get food on the table. Then I went to community college, and then eventually got accepted into the University of Minnesota. So that whole journey was 9 years to try and graduate. And I did it.
Yeah.
I did it. But supporting myself the whole time, which so many of us do, especially folks who age out of the system or have these bad situations, right, where they don't have family to turn to.
Yeah.
And my first real like white collar job was working. I got my foot in the door, bartending, waitressing, cocktail serving at this hotel restaurant. And I pursued that white manager every day. I was like, you need to, like, I want to work in your, whatever that office is. I know what you're doing something at the hotel. You're doing events and I want to be a part of that. You've got to hire me. And because I was, you know, working for him in the restaurant, and I was very, very good at what I did because all I knew was work, right? I had been a workhorse my entire life. That family that I was adopted into, like that's what we were to them. I can't tell you how many chores I did every single day and how many people I cleaned up after and how many people I cooked for, right? Like I was just a constant, like it was like I was like a servant there. So I was great at working. Like I understood like that's what my value is to white people, that I can work. And I did a really good job. And that manager was impressed with me and then ended up giving me an internship in his catering and events office.
Oh.
And I was still, you know, I still had, it still took me 4 years after that to finish school. But I really started to launch my career from there. And from there, then I went to corporate sales for a tech and manufacturing company. That's where I ended up graduating college.
Yeah.
And then I moved to Washington, D.C. and have built a really great career in the nonprofit sector. Although it took me a lot longer to reach my career goals than what I wanted, than what I thought I could, right? Because we all hear these narratives of, especially like people of color or people that are in lower socioeconomic situations, you hear, you just bootstrap it, pull yourself up by the bootstraps. If you just work hard, it's going to happen for you. And I'm sorry, that's bullshit. Yeah. Like, look how hard I worked.
Yeah.
Look how hard I worked. And it took me 9 years to finish school. Look how hard I worked. And I was not able to build the type of a career that I should have by the time I was in my 30s. And so all of that to say, right, like I started realizing that I was really running into some walls and barriers when it came to like this next step, which was executive level positions at these organizations.
Yeah.
And again, I was a great workhorse. So I would get promoted based on my output at certain levels. But when I would ask for the most senior positions in the org, because I deserved them and I was ready, right? I was always hitting these gaps. And furthermore, I didn't have anyone to talk to about any of this. So not only were I chose industries and workplaces, maybe subconsciously, but they were like very white dominated. You know, these fields were very white dominated. And so often I was one of the few people of color, sometimes the only, in the office. And then, of course, my experience in foster care and being transracially adopted and the fact that I did not have any outside support really impacted my work, right? I'm not sure how many of you have that experience, but like when you have a tumultuous home life or just broken relationships in your home life, it really impacts you in your work life. And so,
yes.
Yeah, for me, couldn't talk to anybody about that. Or if I would mention I'm adopted, right? It became this whole thing of like, oh, tell me everything, like be my clickbait.
Mm-hmm.
Or like, nice, okay, I don't really care about that though. So like, let's move on. So it was like, it's these extremes where it's like my identity doesn't matter except, you know, if it's interesting in the moment, but then after that, it doesn't really matter. And so this was happening to me over and over and over again, where could not really connect to like people in like leadership roles. I couldn't authentically connect to them because my experience of how I got there, they couldn't even comprehend it because they obviously didn't have lived experience with it. And their idea and their understanding of adoption and foster care is exactly what, you know, the larger society
Yes.
has us believing it is, that it's wonderful, it's beautiful, it's how families are made, it's how children are saved. So they didn't understand, like, okay, well, how could you possibly have a bad experience? Like, I would get a lot, you know, sometimes I would get comments like, well, shame on you. Like, your parents saved you. Why would you say you had a bad experience?
Oh,
So it's
right.
not safe to talk about that stuff at work. And you know, I thought for a while it was just me, right? I'm not working hard enough. I'm not skilled enough. I'm not educated enough. And when I was 33, I went to go get my MBA because I'm like, okay, this is what I need to do in order to achieve these levels of success. Because it's DC, and that's what everyone does, right? And I'm a highly competitive individual in general. So I'm like, I'm just gonna do it, and I'll finally get my shot. And guess what? It didn't work. And
Oh,
guess what? In school, it was really hard to connect with my peers and cohort mates, even though, right, I'm just as smart as them, I'm just as talented as them, I'm just as driven as them. I got into that program on merit. You know, this NYU is no joke. They do not just let anybody in. You really have to get in on merit. And I'm I'm sitting there thinking, why can I not connect with my classmates? This is ridiculous. Like, we should be able to connect because we're all here for the same reason, right? We
right.
want to better our careers, we want to earn a higher income, all this kind of stuff. And you know, I would share my personal story of, like, you know, because all of those awkward things come up. Oh, what are you doing for Christmas? Are you going home to see your parents? And you know, all this kind of stuff. What were your childhood traditions and la la la
Yeah.
la. And so when I would have to share, right, like, oh, I'm actually I'm not in touch with my family. Like, I don't talk to my adoptive parents, and
No
it's
contact.
very awkward, right? But I'm not
Right.
going to hide that stuff from people because I've hidden it long enough. And I think you know, I had to earn the right to be able to share my story how I wanted. But all of that creates barriers to you building authentic relationships, especially professionally, especially in the workplace. And that's what I had been experiencing over and over and over and over again. And out of grad school, I was pregnant with my first kid, yay. And started, you know, experiencing similar things, even with an MBA degree from this really prestigious institution. And I did land a senior role, paid the most I've ever been paid in my life. It was a great job. It was a great organization, very respected organization in the nonprofit space. And guess what? Some of my peers, especially one of them, making the same pay with the same job title, was 10 years younger than I was.
Mm.
And I was just like, okay, I have dropped all this money on my education, right? I have 10 years of experience on this person. I am able to produce just more elevated work because I'm more experienced than her. Yet we have the same job and we have the same pay. Like, what is wrong? What is wrong with this picture? I was livid.
Yeah.
Not at her, because everyone deserves opportunities to achieve great things if they want them. But what I was upset about was, where was my opportunity at that age? Because I knew I could have had that kind of role at that age.
Mhm.
And or something similar, something adjacent, right? And it just made me furious that there was this kind of gap that I was facing. But I realized if someone like me is facing this, there's going to be so many other people that are facing this.
Right.
I can't even imagine. And we all know, like, well, I hope we all know, right? Foster care statistics, right? Kids that age out of the system, only 1 to 3% actually graduate college, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And people that come from just really bad home environments, right? This total lack of community and family support, it does impact your career trajectory. It does. And I was living proof. But I'm like, okay, I have all this privilege of, being East Asian in America. I'm well educated. I can speak white. I'm now married to a white husband who has a really great family. He has a great job. He has advanced degrees. Like, I have all of this, and yet I still can't achieve certain milestones that others around me are at a much younger age. So I had enough. And what I did was in May of 2023, I quit that job and I started building the Inclusion Initiative. And what the Inclusion Initiative is doing is literally it's built to close the opportunity gap for transracial adoptees and foster care alum.
Yeah.
Because we are experiencing this opportunity gap that we didn't ask for, that we don't deserve. Like, we're working even harder than our peers are to try and get to where we want to go. We have all these levels of barriers on top of being transracial adoptees or foster care alum. A lot of us, most of us, are people of color, right? And so, like, there's just so many different layers of challenges that we have to navigate that we're not getting support for, especially in the workplace. I've never seen career or professional resources geared toward transracial adoptees, and not for foster care alumni at work. I've seen them outside of work, right? We have a lot of personal resources that we can find. And then on top of that, when we do find resources, they're outdated. They look kind of eh. And so people don't really utilize them, or they won't purchase them, or they won't invest in them, right? Because they don't inspire you. And I'm like, this is not cool. Like, we deserve the best of the best. We deserve to have all these professional resources and opportunities that everybody else gets to have. We shouldn't have to take like dated old flyers or workshops or whatever it is that don't inspire us, but also like are not helping us at all, because it's irrelevant to our lived experience now in this day and age. So the Inclusion Initiative is here to like provide like the same amazing professional development resources that you would see at Google, because we deserve it. And I think, there is a really hard challenge with our communities because we've been so ingrained to have this "you're not good enough" mindset. You don't deserve this. You should just be grateful for what you're given. F that. Nope. We deserve the very best. And someone's got to do it. And I talked about how, I know I have a lot of privilege and opportunity now. I have built a pretty good network. I've built a really good career, but it's still not what I wanted at this point in my life. And I'm like, but you know what? I can utilize that to benefit our communities so that we can all work together to level up each other to the next phase of our careers and our professional journeys, because no one else is doing it for us. And one of the big pieces that I was missing was mentorship. And people would tell me all the time, oh, you need to go to this Asian person and be mentored by them. Well, guess what? I'm not like Asian enough for a lot of Asian people because I didn't grow up Asian. I don't have that cultural heritage. I don't have those traditions. I don't have ancestors. I don't have that community. I don't know the language. I don't know the food. I don't know the customs. And quite frankly, like that's not me. I'm Grace Foster. I grew up in Wisconsin. Like that is me. I look Asian. I am Asian. I'm from Korea. But this is my home. This is my culture. This is my community. And I shouldn't be shamed, right, for not having the Asian culture memorized or whatever it is and customs known just because I look Asian. But it's a disconnect when seeking mentors who are Asian because I haven't come across any that were adopted or shared that they were adopted. And so they can't even understand, right, the challenges and the disconnect from my family and the different barriers that I have that they don't have because they have family, they have network, and they've been able to be supported outside of the workplace that has helped their careers, right? Okay, so I will stop there and see where you want to take this next, Greg.
I have a question about the reception of the inclusion initiative so far. How have people received what you're working on?
It's been received really well. I mean, honestly, I wish more people knew about it. I
Yeah,
put it in the chat there, the website for everybody.
thank you.
But I mean, what the reception so far with a few things that I've done, first of all, I've conducted the very first workplace survey for transracial adoptees and foster care alumni. The very first that I'm aware of. I've not seen it anywhere. I'm like, because I was digging right for the stats and the info. I'm like, where is this information about us? No one's done it yet. No one's cared to do a study. So I'm launching the first study. And that survey has been really well received from people that have taken it, right? I'm getting comments like, I've never been asked these questions before. I've never been offered resources like this before. It's like, well, yeah,
Yeah,
me neither. That's why I'm doing this. So that has been really well received. And then, of course, you know, my platform now is in beta. I'm hoping to launch it publicly late summer of this year. But right now, I have beta members who are really just experiencing just some of the resources and connections and opportunities that are available on the platform. And that's been going really well too. You know, people really enjoy just having this safe and inclusive space that is built for us by somebody, right, with lived experience. It's so
yeah,
hard to find these spaces that are actually built by people with lived experience. And it makes a big difference, right, in like what we're receiving, the quality, the breadth, and just like the content in general. It's just so more authentic and real and applicable than content made by people or given by people that don't have lived experience.
do you find that or believe that companies will have an interest in it, or is it more the individual people who are working?
Yeah, I mean that's the dream. So the entire pipe dream, everybody, is that this will be filled, right, with the millions of individuals out there who are either transracially adopted or have been in the foster care system. It's estimated there's about 5 to 6 million across the United States. It's unknown though, because we don't self-disclose, especially as adults. We don't talk about it. So the dream, right, is to have this really expansive network where we all are there to find each other and to network with each other and find community with each other. But, you know, there's a range of people on the platform. There's just people that just graduated all the way up to founders and executives and companies. And so the whole goal, right, is that those that have more experience and more resources are going to be able to help guide and mentor those with less. And we're all going to help elevate each other. And then there's a lot of like hope that there's going to be a lot of mid-level career people
Mhm.
that, you know, like I was 10 years ago,
Yeah.
where we are struggling, right, to find leaders that share our lived identities and that we can relate with and have true, meaningful mentorship with. And so these middle level managers or people that want to be managers, right, can now find adoptees and foster care alum that have these amazing positions or amazing companies and can be mentored and elevated by those
Mhm.
resources. And then, yeah, I mean, companies need to practice what they preach, right? Unfortunately, DEIB is struggling right now, but all companies still have a corporate responsibility arm, and they all know that diversity is good for their companies. So we need to be included in those diversity conversations. And the hope is, right, that I can partner with companies to invest in us. So provide resources for us, but also hire us. So I would love to have eventual corporate, nonprofit, you name it, opportunities on this platform where they're specifically recruiting those with our lived experience. Yeah, so that's the whole pipe dream is job opportunities, mentorship, but you know, most importantly, it's to have the ability to build a professional network with each other so that
Yeah.
we can elevate, help, and support each other because visibility is everything. If we can't see each other, we can't help each other. And if we can't see somebody, right, in the next level of their career that shares our lived experience, we can't always imagine us being in those positions. So if you can see it, right, then you really start to feel like you can achieve that. But then you can also find tangible help. And then professional development resources, like I'm hosting, I have a very, um, very renowned therapist who is a transracial adoptee and focuses on supporting the adoptee community. He is doing a workshop that is specifically addressing how to navigate our identities in the workplace. I have never seen a workshop like this for professional development resources for our community. So we're hosting like the first one I've ever seen
Wow.
for our beta testers next week. And like, I want more of that, right? We have imposter syndrome. We have so many triggers in the workplace due to like our lived experience from what we've experienced, either abandonment or abusive relationships or you know, just that scarcity mindset that we're always like struggling with. You know, that shows up, right, and how we ask for promotions, or if we even ask for promotions, how we um, sometimes, right, we'll overwork. Well, a lot of times we'll overwork because we're trying to prove ourselves that
Right.
we deserve to be there. Everyone deserves to be there. That's why you're hired. But then we overwork because we don't feel like we deserve to be there. So like all of those types of triggers are very real for us that we can't talk about at work, and there's certainly no resources for that. So I'm gonna, you know, there's more workshops and courses and stuff centered around like those topics. Um, so yeah, I mean, that's like the platform in a nutshell, and it continues to evolve and grow. I mean, that's the whole point of the beta.
Yeah. Exciting to see it happening. I wanted to ask you one final thing, which is you in this vision for mentorship and how you found yourself having not had the opportunity for that. You were seeking out people, you're saying white people and powerful people that you were going after and insinuating yourself into situations to for purposes to show what you can do and for advancement. Do you find now that the inclusion initiative is launched, have you found somebody you would like to call your own mentor? Have you found people like that that are joining your beta testing?
Yeah, I mean, there are, like I said, there's incredible founders and leaders with our lived experience that I never knew. And one of my first events was with a Black transracial adoptee. His name is Isaac. He is like not in a bad way, but he's like 10 years younger than me, and he's founded this like amazing company.
Yeah.
And it's a tech startup. And I'm like, dude, that's amazing. Like, I can learn so much from you. You had the opportunity to start this company in a similar vein that I'm starting, right? He's building a tech company that's supporting adoptees in their personal life and their adoptive families in their personal life and relationships. But the fact that he's done this at his age and like the success that he's having, like that's really impactful for me, no matter my age, right? I'm 10 years older than him, yes, but yes, Isaac Etter.
Isaac.
But like he he's just an inspiration that that's like what he wants to do with his life. He's so skilled, so talented, has a lot of potential, but he's choosing, like I am, to dedicate his time, resources, talent to build this for our communities. That's super inspiring to me. And that's exactly what I was hoping for with this platform, right? That this kind of community and network that we can come together to show each other what's possible and then help each other get there. Like he and I are, working together. We're talking about collaborating. He would love to hire from the Inclusion Initiative platform. So like we're trying to like figure that out, right?
Yeah,
But yeah, like that's inspiring to me.
it's great. So let me conclude by, first of all, thanking you so much for the story. It's so compelling. Yeah, I didn't want to stop it. So I appreciate everything you've shared here. I know everybody does, and the vision that you have with the Inclusion Initiative. Where is the best place people can follow you, since this will be on the YouTube channel, the Fireside Adoptees YouTube channel? People will be listening and watching, but you mentioned the Inclusion Initiative, but where are the best places to find you?
Yeah, I would say the best place is really LinkedIn. I'm extremely active on LinkedIn because I'm trying to call in our community in the professional space to say, hey, this exists. Come join, come benefit, come partner. Like that is a space where I feel like, oh, sorry, I pasted that too. Okay. So that's a space where I feel like there's so many of us, but we just haven't self-identified yet
Yeah, it is.
because we're afraid to.
Well, Grace, thank
But
you
you can
so much.
follow, I'm sorry, it
Oh
has
yeah, go ahead.
on the website, so the
Yeah.
inclusioninitiative.com, that
Okay.
has our social links. So if you want to follow us on social, that has all of our social links.
Perfect. Really excited. Thank you again so much. This was a really neat opportunity to hear about something that's not being done. And I'm sure a lot of people are, wow, didn't know this was out there. What would for people, transracial adoptees and foster people said, well, if that had been out there for me, what might have been available to me earlier in my life, for example, or now what can I do now that I know this is out
Mm-hmm.
there? How do I participate in that? Because I'm sure you would
Mm-hmm.
want to say it's not too late for people to get involved at whatever stage they're in their lives at this point, and say, what can I still do?
That's right. Yeah. And there are beta spots open still. So there's a handful of spots open. If folks on this call are interested, you can DM me or you can just inquire directly on the website. But we'd love to have you and love for you to see what this is and give your opinions and insight on like how we can make this like the best platform ever for our communities. So would love to have your partnership in that.
Thank you. Well, again, a great conversation, Grace. Thank you so much for what you've shared. And we appreciate your time and the care you're putting into this for people in the community and reaching a lot of people and giving them a chance to develop in ways that they are, as you said, are completely up to. And it's just a matter of the resources being in the right hands and available to people that they may not have known were even out there.
Yeah. And I encourage everyone to just, own your story, own your narrative. Like you really have a powerful story to share, but only if you want to share it. and sharing it in the way that best represents you and not what others feel like it should sound like.
Very much so. Very
yeah.
wise. Well, thank you. So this will conclude the recorded portion from Zoom. You'll hear in just a minute the announcement of the conclusion of that. I want to thank everybody who's been here tonight to watch this. To remind everybody also that we will be, as we said, on the Fireside Adoptees YouTube channel. This will be available with other interviews we have here. And it was a great opportunity. So again, thanks so much, Grace.
Yeah, and I can stick around for a few minutes if people want to ask any questions once the recording is done.
Great. Thank you so much.